Good morning. My name is Lou Carbone, and I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A little different than the weather here in Las Vegas. I'm often asked why I live in Minneapolis, and I don't have a very logical reason for living in Minneapolis. Most of us in Minneapolis talk about the quality of life, and I'm not quite sure what we mean by that. Is there a problem with the sound? We okay now? Sorry about that. So we're asked about the quality of life in Minnesota, and what I'd like to do is I've been there 21 years, and I went there for a 2-year assignment and have been there 21 years. What I'd like to do is just share a brief lesson from 21 winters in Minnesota. So what I'd like you to do is, much like this gentleman, I'd ask you not to have a very myopic perspective as I speak this morning, and whatever discipline you come from, whatever area you work in, I'd like you to step back far enough from that world that you live in every day and step back far enough to look at a broad perspective, to be sure that we're not really scraping the ice off of the wrong automobile, and to have a much wider purview of customers and the emotions of customers and the experiences that they have. At Experience Engineering, we eat, sleep, breathe, unraveling the riddle that's human experience for a very select group of clients who really want to manage the total experience, the whole experience that their customers have, and the value that that experience can create. And what I'd like to do is, probably 15 or 16 years ago, one of the early pieces of work around customer experience that I did was in a test with Progressive Auto Insurance, actually down in South Florida. And Progressive was just beginning to face some problems. They used to write auto insurance for people who were high risk. And they had determined that they wanted to go direct to the consumer. And their fear was that in going direct to the consumer to expand their market, they would encounter resistance from their existing agency base. And as they were one of the first insurance companies to actually, along with Gelco, to start selling, Geico, to start selling insurance on the web, they had to enrich the total customer experience to keep agents from defecting. So as they did this, they really began to look at opportunities. And what we tested was really thinking about the experience that people had from the customer back, inside the hearts and minds and souls of customers, and creating a distinctive experience that was so compelling that agents wouldn't dare go with another company. And that led to the introduction of a couple of things that were fundamental in differentiating the experience at Progressive. One was actually having instant response vehicles show up at the scene of an accident with the adjuster trained in grief counseling. Now, you might think grief counseling, is that because of fatalities? It's actually because in a casualty loss, we're actually suffering a loss. So having those adjusters understand what a loss is about, what it feels like, and the stages that people go through in that process was huge. Now, these vans back 14, 15 years ago, can you imagine trying to rig up the technology to write a check from the van? There was real breakthrough stuff being done then. In fact, it was a big deal to have a cell phone on board 14 or 15 years ago. So the opportunity to begin to look at experiences from the customer back became very powerful. Actually, Progressive in another part of that same project, and this was ultimately rolled out nationally also, was giving customers the quote from competitors, what competitors' prices would be, which was extraordinarily distinctive. Giving someone else's prices, your competitor's pricing, to your customer. And we knew that 7 out of 8 times, even if we were higher, the policy would still be written by Progressive. So when we begin to look at this, there are some very interesting aspects when we begin to think customer back. There are a number of organizations that we've worked with over time in trying to understand this customer experience and engineering customer experiences. And there are some fundamental principles that I'm going to go through that I will explain throughout the presentation. One is moving from making and selling to sensing and responding. The other is the thinking customer back, realizing that customers are both emotional and rational beings, understanding and leveraging the role of the unconscious mind, managing experience clues that are embedded in those experiences, and then a rigorous system to develop and manage those clues. And as we go through these, I won't be doing this point by point, but hopefully at the end of the presentation, this is what the net takeaway should be. Now, I think it's very interesting to look at what started to formulate some of these thoughts about managing clues in my mind. And there are many of you who may not. How many remember Howard Johnson's restaurants? If you could just raise your hand. All right, very good. Generally, in an MBA class, I'll have to kind of explain the whole history of Howard Johnson's, and there were actually restaurants. But at one time, there were over 800 Howard Johnson's restaurants all across the nation. It was the king of the highways, and I was working at an ad agency and had responsibility for a number of clients. And at the beginning of the week, I would be up in Boston with these folks from Howard Johnson's, and I got to work with them in the last 6 months of their existence. I wasn't responsible for the demise of the company in 6 months. But for me, this was a childhood dream to go to work on this brand that was so phenomenal. I grew up in the Northeast, and we would travel to Florida, and I remember wearing this. This was actually a menu cap. I remember wearing this silly menu cap, and my parents, we would stop at a Howard Johnson's for breakfast on the way to Florida. We would stop at Howard Johnson's for lunch. We'd stop at a Howard Johnson's for dinner, and then we'd even stay at a Howard... Thank you. Sorry about that. I could have shaved the beard off for the presentation, but my wife would never forgive me. So we grew up making these stops with Howard Johnson. So I'm at Howard Johnson's with these folks, and we're in a meeting, and we're talking about cutting a 1/16 of an inch off of a straw to save $16,000. And in meetings there, we're talking about going from a 4-ply napkin to a 2-ply napkin to save X number of dollars. And I'm sitting there scratching my head watching all of this. And in fact, Howard Johnson's, and this isn't the period of time that I worked with them, I'm not quite that old, but they were known for 28 flavors of ice cream. I'm in a meeting, and there's an operational meeting, and they're talking about the difficulty of purging the system of the flavors, 3 or 4 flavors, I guess it was 3 flavors, rum raisin, which was actually, I think, called frozen pudding. And there was this residual taste of rum that would stay in the hoses and in the system, and it would take too long to clean them. So they're talking about going and dropping 3 flavors for efficiency. Sitting next to the vice president of marketing, and I leaned over and I said, what are we going to do? Will we change the claim to 25 flavors? Will we add 3 more flavors? And I was told, Lou, don't worry about it. We'll just tell them we're out. I'm beginning to wonder where the customer resides in all of this. And sure enough, over time, all of the orange roofs disappeared. In fact, I think archaeologists will be digging up tile and finding these orange baked plates 150 years from now. This is a picture actually taken of an old Howard Johnson's restaurant in Dallas just 2 years ago where the paint peels through. But America's landmark for eating roadside vanished. Now, what was fascinating is at the same time I was working with Howard Johnson's in this complete focus on becoming the low-cost producer and extracting value from customers rather than creating value, I would leave Quincy to meet with another client. I would fly down to Orlando to work with a very clued-in organization. That organization was unbelievable. Working with that organization changed my life forever. I will never be the same. It was like being struck by lightning. The rest of my life has been altered by seeing the world through those eyes and that perspective. We were talking about the temperature and the velocity of the wind blowing in your face in Spaceship Earth. At Howard Johnson's, they weren't even aware there was oxygen. Talking about the temperature that an ice cream bar would be frozen at because it would melt at a different rate in Florida than it would somewhere else. But to be so inside the customer's heart and soul to know what it feels like to have an ice cream bar melt in your hand. And worse than that, melt in a 5-year-old's hand. The understanding that customers are experiencing things in so many different ways. The smell of chocolate chip cookies are pumped out onto Main Street out of a glass jar. Main Street itself is designed on a forced perspective, a Hollywood perspective, so that when you go in the morning, it looks like it goes on forever and ever and ever, and at night, when your feet are tired, it looks like a very short walk. But thinking of every aspect of how a customer feels becomes so powerful. Now, there are organizations and people, and I've had many clients that have actually gone to Disney and gone to the Disney Institute, and they'll come back and try to adapt what I would call best practices. But the essence of what's underneath it is what I would call next practices. What Disney and the magic of the whole Disney concept boil down to a very simple thought is the management of clues that create a feeling, an emotional connection. And if you think about it, a cartoonist creates an emotional connection in that final 4th frame. And Disney was a cartoonist. It was brilliant. And you embed clues in the previous frames to create that connection. It's like a punchline in a joke. To make that connection, you take that thought in terms of what clues are embedded where and what feelings they create and apply that to a movie and you have 100,000 frames. Apply that to the parks, and you've got millions of frames to embed with clues. So as we look at this, what I became fascinated with was the power of Disney to create such value that people are willing to part with cash. Now, how many of you have been to Disney more than once? Anyone more than 5 times? More than 10? Did you work there? No. What becomes absolutely amazing is it costs less probably to travel to Europe, or it used to, probably not any longer, than it does to go to Disney. So this fascination of what it is that causes people to part with cash. Now, what is really unique is we've been told that the marketing concept and what business should be all about. Drucker has said this over the years, but organizations have a very difficult time believing that the purpose of an organization is to create value for its customers, and the reward for that value is profit. Most organizations are in the business of making profit and extracting value from customers versus creating value for customers. So that if we stay focused on creating value for customers, the profits follow as a reward. Because people are ultimately, whether it's in business to business, are the people that part with the cash, that push the mouse, that click the button, that moves the invisible money any longer. And it's human emotion that ultimately bonds our customers to the experiences that we create. And what we find is that traditional measures, traditional ways of thinking, and this is why I say please open your mind to thinking about a new way of doing business, because traditional customer satisfaction isn't enough to predict customer loyalty. In fact, Fred Reichelt in the Loyalty Effect tells us that 60 to 80% of the customers who defected on a prior survey had checked off top box, so that customer loyalty is not tied to customer satisfaction. In fact, what Fred talks about these days is a net promoter score, which is, would you recommend this business, this experience to a friend or an associate? So as we look at this, I became fascinated by consumer behavior, and there's a hierarchy of consumer behavior that was established by Earl Sasser and Jim Haskett up at the Harvard Business School, that moves from satisfaction to loyalty to commitment to apostle-like behavior to ownership. And we are on the brink of tools such as blogs and all of these community spaces that allow the opportunity to feel a sense of ownership that is absolutely phenomenal, unparalleled in terms of the tools that we have to move up this hierarchy. Yet we remain stagnant and stay in the old world. Now, I ask you, is a loyalty program from an airline really indicative of my loyalty, or is it a reward program? Is there anyone here who's either from Detroit or Minneapolis? You may be able to identify with what I'm about to talk about. I've been a platinum flyer with Northwest for as long as Northwest has had the program. And my experience really tells me that turbulent times, and the reason that they're in such tough times, is because they don't understand me as a customer at all. They think I'm loyal. I think I'm being rewarded for a horrible experience. Now, what's really amazing is the way they cause me to feel about myself. I do not like myself when I fly on Northwest. I become childlike because I have this status of platinum or whatever. I can't believe that I could begrudge a 5-year-old a seat in first class. If I don't get upgraded, I become like a child. I could almost pout and get on the ground. And I'll walk through first class and I'll be like, what's he doing up here? And I go from this hero to row 26, center section, and no one even cares whether I have a beverage for the next 3 hours. Or I go to check golf clubs to get them home faster. My wife disowned me in an airport because I created a scene, because I was told that they couldn't check my bags there. And I kept asking. I'd been told by 3 people that the general manager or the station manager could do it. And the station manager comes up to me and waves his finger in my face and says, "You don't seem to understand, but there's no way that's going to happen." I turned into an animal. I couldn't believe what I did. My wife went upstairs at Tampa Airport. She was embarrassed because I waved my finger back at him and I said, you're the reason that Northwest is bankrupt, and I hope you're the first person to lose your job." 2 people in line clapped. I don't like feeling that way. I don't like feeling that way. And when you look at the way they've managed the crews, there used to be towels on board in first class. And there used to be, well, meals. I think they called them meals at the time. And then they went to snacks, and then they went to, pretzels, and then they took those away, and now you pay for Pringles and all this great stuff. You actually pay for blankets and pillows on some airlines. Northwest even took the ticket jacket away, and then customers complained and they brought it back. How in touch with customers' feelings are we? I pray that JetBlue comes to Minneapolis. My bags are packed. I'm really ready. I'm like, this is it. I've had it. Now, are my thoughts rational? Or are they emotional? Concept of ownership. Harley-Davidson. Sort of the poster child for a feeling of ownership. I was invited to speak to the Harley Owners Group. To speak to that group, you have to go to a hog rally, which is hog owners. These are all owners of Harleys. I had to go to a hog rally in Greenville, South Carolina. Then you speak before the Board of Governors and do the same speech you're going to do for the general group. And then you do your final speech for the general group. Well, I couldn't work it all into a schedule, so I ended up actually just going to the hog rally. And there were people that were tattooed, and you've always seen these tattoos, but I couldn't believe where tattoos were. They were everywhere. And there were people of all ages, people of all shapes and sizes. It was a phenomenal experience. But what was most amazing to me is there isn't anybody that wouldn't love to have their logo tattooed on a customer's arm. Because the power of feeling so emotionally bonded. Now, what you don't know is that there are tattoo artists waiting at the party tonight at Caesars. After a few drinks and a couple of Red Bulls, the power is so unbelievable. What was most amazing to me was the cross-section of consumers. There were people that had crawled out from rocks somewhere in the mountains of this country to the CEO of Mobil Oil. But there was a common bond, there was a common emotional bond that brought these people together. Now, is it rational for a 50-year-old man to have a Harley? Or is it emotional? Trueford & Hill, barbershop up in Toronto, Canada. Doing work for Royal Bank of Canada, up there for a second project, there with my team. I get there about 3 hours early. I get a little tense before I speak, and I get like a cat. I have to find a restroom and walk and do all this stuff, whether it's a small group or a large group. I'm wandering through Scotia Plaza. I see this barber shop, and I'm thinking, God, I've got 3 hours before the rest of the team arrives. What in the world am I going to do? So I wander by this place, and it says Trueford & Hill, barbers to British royalty since 1805. I never tried to figure out how they cut British royalty's hair from Toronto. But there was a smell coming out of this place that was so powerful. It was reminiscent of a cologne that my grandfather and my dad would wear that was very, very expensive. It was a very exclusive cologne. They used to buy it by the keg. I think it was called Aqua Velva. But this scent was so comforting for me that I walked in and I said, I need to get a haircut. So I walk in and it says the Trufford and Hill Club, and I ask questions like, do I need to belong to the club to get a haircut? No, we can squeeze you in, but you can get advanced haircuts and buy them in a package, and with the way my hair grows, that wouldn't be a great investment. So I go in. They have a little retail area. They have a place where you can get a pedicure or a manicure. And the barbers are wearing white coats. And you could tell who the barber was. You go into an emergency department today, you don't even know who the doctor is. He's got a name tag on, and they're cutting hair so precisely. They're holding their hands like this and cutting hair, and I'm like, man, this place, with as little hair as I've got, every hair is important. So this precision was very important to me. So I get a haircut, and I am wearing a white cotton apron, real cotton, 100% cotton, not some polyester stuff that would melt if the temperature in the room went up a little too high. With these stripes, not big puffy orange flowers or purple flowers. I mean, I felt great. I even got a shave, and I don't shave. So I go to the meeting, and we have an extraordinary session. I was feeling so great, so confident. We leave, we get down to the street level after leaving Royal Bank Plaza, and my phone rings, and it's like, can you start the project on Monday? I mean, this is everybody's dream. I'm ready to do backflips. So I said to everyone, let's go back to the hotel, and we'll go out tonight, and we'll celebrate. I go to the hotel, and I walk into the restroom, into the bathroom, and I flip on the lights, and I look in the mirror, and I got a horrible haircut. I got a crappy haircut, but I felt great. It was so bad. I had a cowlick that I had like a wet towel and trying to, dry this thing with a dryer like for 5 minutes before I could be presentable. I looked like crap in the meeting, but it was amazing. It was a lousy haircut. What do you think I do 3 weeks later when we're in Toronto working on this project? What do? I go back. I not only went back then, I actually went back every time I'd start scheduling haircuts around Toronto. Speaking in London, I go to the original Trufford and Hill in London. It's like I'm making a pilgrimage to Lourdes. They have one that opened in Las Vegas at Caesars, and I come to Las Vegas and I go there to get a haircut. I'm scheduling haircuts around Trufford and Hill, and my wife is like, are you too good to get your haircut in Eden Prairie, Minnesota? How logical is that? How rational is that? It's just about lunchtime. In Phoenix, with my family, visiting my daughter. And if you have a daughter in college or have ever been in college, a visit from your parents is a visit with a checkbook. And it's like dinner here, dinner there, all of this stuff. And one night we're really exhausted and said, let's get a takeout pizza. So my daughter said, I've heard of a pizzeria in Phoenix that's phenomenal. And I said, well, do they deliver? And she said, no. I don't think so, but we can call. So we call and they don't deliver. And I said, okay, well, I'd like to order a pizza to pick up. And they said, we don't take orders over the phone. I said, wait a minute, you mean I have to come there while you bake the pizza? Yes. Well, we go there, and there's a line. And there's a 2-hour wait. And I'm like, can I squeeze in to order the pizza? No, you have to wait in line. But we have a bar next door. Why don't you go in there? So we go into the bar. And this bar was phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. Lit so well. fact, if you've ever been to Houston's and that pinpoint lighting that looks like you're the only people in the whole restaurant, that's what it felt like. We had an incredible visit with my daughter. It was so phenomenal that by the time we got over to the pizzeria, it was just secondary, and we said, let's sit down and eat the pizza here. So we sit down. I'd like to introduce you to the $200 takeout pizza. Did we love it? We loved it. We tell people about it all the time. And the next morning, I said to my daughter, wow, that was pretty wild last night. It was like $200. And she said, Dad, it was great. It was like being punched in the face, but enjoying every minute of it. The power of human experience. Emotions. There are experiences that we reject, experiences that we accept, and experiences that are so preferential that we want to do them over and over again, and we want to tell other people about them. That's what the age of experience is about, is understanding the richness of unlocking those connections. And the poster child for the experience age, so to speak, is Starbucks. What is it that some of you probably know that you couldn't even buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks originally when they started. At Starbucks, they did beans only, and you could go there for a cupping. And it wasn't until Howard Schultz joined Starbucks in 1982 that he took a trip to Italy. And how many have been to an espresso bar in Italy? He goes to an espresso bar and he sees the same people there morning after morning, sees them there in the afternoon. Now in Italy, they probably never left. But he hears the sounds. He sees all of these things that are part of the experience. And he comes back and convinces Starbucks to test a concept in '84. Big companies move very slowly. And he leaves, and he founds a company called Il Giornale that really brought to life the experiential notions of an espresso bar and the feelings and the emotions that are created there, that sense of being connected. And just 2 years later, he bought the 17 Starbucks stores. And the rest is history. How different would the world be today in terms of understanding experience if it was not for Starbucks? Well, for one thing, we wouldn't be paying $3.82 for a cup of coffee, an average price. Every Starbucks store is carefully designed to enhance the quality of everything the customers see, hear, touch, smell, and taste. Now, why is this significant? Well, you see, when I asked you to keep a very wide perspective, I believe that we are victims of the industrial age. Everything that we learn, the way that our organizations are structured, the way that companies are structured, what we taught when we get our MBAs and what we're taught in schools is built on an ancient model or an older model rooted in the industrial age, which is make and sell, product-driven. And those days are over. And yet organizations are so steeped in that thinking, structured in that thinking, those organizations that release those bonds and actually begin to understand that the new order is about sensing and responding, and sensing in such a way that we know even before customers know what their desires and needs are. That's the challenge before us today. So as we look at that and begin to understand what experience management is all about, in the past we were very much rooted in looking at behaviors, how customers act, what they actually end up doing. And then we became interested in customers' attitudes, if you will, how they feel about us as a company. And we'd begin to look at their attitudes. Are they loyal? Are they promoting us? Are they passionate? Are they feeling connected or committed to us? But what drives that is the emotions. Those emotional components, how we make customers feel about themselves, those feelings that transform lives, cause people to feel a certain way. It's those emotions that shape the attitudes that drive the behaviors. So it's understanding those emotions and the clues, those things that link with people, that create those emotional connections. That's the power of the new order of understanding, sensing, and responding. This is a dynamic change because in the traditional world of branding, I refer to what we call the brand canyon, if you will, which is we spend more time, more money understanding how people feel about us as a company, and very little time understanding how we cause them to feel, what they feel about themselves in the experiences that they have with us, is overlooked. And that is ultimately where the real value is created that brings them back again and again, because it's those feelings that they have, those emotions that they associate with the brand. And we see indications throughout that the way that we've thought about branding in the past is outdated. It won't stretch as far as we have to. Brands have run out of juice, Roberts, it's the CEO at Saatchi writes. More and more people have grown to expect great performances from products, services, and experiences. And a corporate brand really represents the promises made to all audiences regarding the unique experience they have whenever and wherever they come into contact with the brand. Now, what becomes so powerful is when we understand the emotional content of what we create for people. We hear so much talk about empowerment, and this is a great story about a FedEx employee. A gentleman named Eric Jackson had a gentleman working for him, and Eric was actually out of the country at the time, that an employee committed the company to a huge commitment that was never questioned, because they understood the brand and they understood how FedEx desires making people feel.
The storm was on a Monday, and we got back here on the Sunday after, and there was no communication. No, we didn't know what we would find. The penguins have been here since we opened. I didn't know if they would be alive when we got here. I ran up here, and it was dark. We had no power. But, you know, with the flashlight, I was able to 1, 2, 3, and then finally 17, 18, and when I got to 19, that's when I ran in there. We usually keep it pretty cool in there. The water's about 62, the air temperature is about 67. When we got back, the water was at 94 degrees, the air probably a little warmer than that.
When we heard that it would be the best thing to airlift the animals out, the Monterey Bay Aquarium volunteered to do that.
I actually flew with them, and we went out to Monterey, landed at 1:30 in the morning. 9 months is a long time to go without penguins. Do you know that? It's been hard walking by here and not seeing penguins. We had a little wind-up toy penguin in there that we kept for 9 months. I think if you're an animal keeper in an institution like this, you really shouldn't have a favorite, but that's impossible with patients. She's an adorable bird. She'll sing to you. I sing to her. She's just a great animal. I know I'm looking forward to, the entire staff is looking forward to, and I think the city is looking forward to the penguins coming back. FedEx has been unbelievable. They're flying the birds in. They're taking care of everything. What can we do to safely and humanely get the animals back to you?
Basically, a call came into the public relations department at FedEx from Melissa Lee, and she had the idea that FedEx has shipped animals in the past and wanted to know if we could help out. And being the native New Orleanian, I immediately jumped on it and said, of course we can do this.
And the next thing we know, we're working on bringing our penguins home.
We needed special pressurization requirements for the sea otters. We needed to make sure the temperature was okay, which meant that we needed to charter an Airbus aircraft.
never forget the generosity of FedEx, and the city of New Orleans will never forget the role that FedEx has played in bringing the penguins home and reopening the aquarium.
Understand the emotional content and the connection that our businesses represent, it becomes very easy. I mean, it becomes powerful. Too much understanding, too late. If you decide to find your business as real estate and renting out videos versus the permission to be in the business of creating these emotional connections for customers any way that you could, how much more powerful is that? It's the way that Ted Levitt talked about the marketing myopia years ago, that the railroads saw themselves in the railroad business versus the transportation business. So how do we step back far enough to understand that how people feel in an experience is the ultimate and true value that we create, which in turn is what they associate with the company and how they feel about the company. So what becomes critical to that thinking is knowing how customers think, understanding how they think. We've learned more in the last decade about neuroscience and psychology than in the entire history of those disciplines. The power of the unconscious mind, those things that happen that we're not even aware of that we're aware of. How many of you have ever purchased a paper out of a vending box? If you did, raise your hand and keep your hand up, if you would. Now, when you purchase that paper in a vending box, if you took the top paper, keep your hand up. Unconsciously, there's a reason why we don't take that top paper. Heuristics and studies around in our DNA and our unconscious thoughts, there are thoughts of contamination that go back generations in terms of what's embedded in the way we think. So a colleague of mine at the Harvard Business School, Jerry Zaltman, has written a book called How Customers Think. And I've been working with Jerry for 13, 14, maybe even longer than that now. And actually, we worked on a project where we did PET scans 15 years ago of people buying automobiles and see what parts of the brain were stimulated by that experience. And it's not any surprise that the closest thing is being hunted and chased. But what we learned is that the tangible attributes of a product or service have far less influence on customer preference than the subconscious sensory and emotional elements derived from the total experience. 95% of what we process in an experience takes place on an unconscious level. It's literally what's below the tip of the iceberg. There are individual wants, cultural forces, psychological and biological needs that are all influenced by the experiences that we have and the way we interpret and frame those experiences. And often, most of what we do is based on conscious opinions of what people say, which is at the very, very top. We cause people in traditional research to create intellectual alibis. So how do we begin to understand how we frame things? You look at something, you're exposed to something, and you have thoughts and feelings. It's impossible not to. You have thoughts and feelings. Now, prior to Pac-Man, there was a thing called Pong, the height of technology gaming, watching a ball go back and forth. But you can see 3 Pac-Man figures, I hope, here. Anyone see anything other than 3 Pac-Man figures? Triangle. Now, what is so wild is that there is no triangle. We frame that based on the clues and the interpretation in our mind and the way this incredible processor works. It says there's a triangle there. In fact, we can create 2 triangles. And customers consciously and unconsciously continuously filter a barrage of clues and organize them into a set of impressions. Some of those impressions are rational, some of them are emotional. And it's basically what we see, hear, smell, taste, and feel. All we have are the senses. And we refer to functional clues, those clues that deal with the functionality of the good or service, mechanic clues, which are those stimuli associated with things, and eumanic clues, those stimuli that are associated with people, choice of words, tone of voice, levels of enthusiasm, connections in language, appearance, etc. And what I'd like to do for a moment is go on a clue hunt with you and actually look at some clues that we see around us. Some of them are very, very background, if you will. And then there are others that are really straightforward and out front. And as we look at these clues all around us, we interpret them. And we have feelings and we have thoughts. Think about this sign and this sign. Exit only, please. How different does that feel than do not enter? Now, where do you think in the world they would talk about exit only, please? At Disney. In fact, at Disney, they finish signs in 360 degrees because that's the way we experience them. You work in textile services. I mean, where would you rather work, in the laundry or in textile services? I mean, it sounds like you're trying to create some new polyester or something. Here's a hotel room that I checked into, and on the pillow at night is traveler safety tips. I grew up saying a prayer about not waking up in the morning. This does not make me feel good. I go to bed anxious. It's like lock your valuables up in the safe. I'd rather go to a place where they'll bet that I'll be alive in the morning and will make breakfast for me and bet on it. Now, toilet paper tells us a lot. Toilet paper speaks volumes. Because I could check into a hotel room, and this is a clue. Now, I checked into this room. You can imagine what the rest of the room feels like. I checked in here, and I'm wondering, who was here before I got here? Or did they forget to clean my bathroom? Because we've become accustomed to a thing called the toilet paper triangle. Its absence is a clue. Its presence is a clue. In fact, there's no limit to creativity. We can emboss the toilet paper with a logo. Now, if I were in the marketing department and brand standards, I'd be a little reluctant to have people using my logo that way. But we could do the double triangle. We could do the triple triangle. There's no limit to creativity. We could do the stuffed pocket. We could do the pocket with the rose over the top of it. We could do the triple trifold ruffle over the toilet paper triangle. Or, God forbid, you're in a hurry to use this bathroom. Or what in the world do you do with the orchid? So as we look at these experiences, there are clues that come into our world. And in a business hotel one night, I check in, and towel origami hit a business hotel. A swan. I had one of those moments where someone says, go upstairs, freshen up, take 5 minutes, and we'll meet. The first 3 minutes, I'm trying to figure out what the hell to do with the swan. Do I use it? Who's been fondling the towel before I got there? And then there's a conflicting clue that tells me they're not going to wash my regular towels because of the environment. And I'm like, why did they waste water doing this with a swan? How well did they really understand the significance of those clues? Now, I don't mind, on a cruise ship, I don't mind a hanging monkey or, you know, all of the things you can get on a cruise ship. But in a business hotel, I don't want to fight an elephant for my sunglasses in the morning. Now, you cannot not have an experience. The question is how managed or haphazard is that experience? How well architected is that experience? How well defined are the clues? How well do we understand the unconscious and emotional content of the clues that people are processing? Do we have an experience that has a whole set of random clues that don't connect to a way that we want someone to feel about themselves when they've interacted with the experience that we create? Or do those clues come together in a way that create an emotional bond, a connection that we're not even aware of, that we're aware of, that becomes so compelling that we go back again and again and again? And we can systematically and purposefully design experience clues to create feelings that emotionally engage and bond customers. This is the world of experience. This is the future. Learning about experiences in new and unique ways that close the gap between current customer experience and the desired customer experience. Ways of understanding the unconscious thoughts and needs of consumers. And there's a methodology and set of tools that we've been using for years that have been developed by Jerry Zaltman that deal with walking around in the maze of the consumer mind. It's a 2.5-hour way of probing and having the customer go wherever they go versus a set of prescribed questions. And why are these deep metaphors important? Because deep metaphors are the way that we frame our thinking. And we could be framing our thinking quite differently. In fact, in a recent study that was done with kindergarten students, teacher was teaching the students that the world was round. In their framing, students were thinking that the world was round like a pancake. The disconnects in terms of the way that information is interpreted and understanding the framing becomes huge. Even understanding how we think about shopping and how different cultures frame shopping becomes extraordinarily powerful. Language analysis. We've done language analysis over the years, and when you look at linguistics, I'll have a car ready for you in 5 minutes, I'll have the car ready for you in 5 minutes, and I'll have your car ready for you in 5 minutes. This is probably the single most overlooked area in electronic interaction. In fact, in one study that we did for a bank, the language that customers used and the language that was on the website had over a 300% degree of difference. And they will tell you that in communications, anything above 30% difference in communications language, generally in counseling, people are headed for divorce court. Clue scanning. What are the clues that are embedded in the experiences that we have? How do we become aware of the clues? And once you become clue conscious, it ruins your life. In an emergency department, staff came in on their own time on a weekend to re-clue an area. How different does that one experience feel versus the other when you're clue conscious? It's being aware of all of these clues that customers process. Then we look at how do we create clues. And the most critical aspect of creating clues is having an experience motif. That experience motif is what people desire feeling about themselves. How do they want to feel in that experience? And that becomes a North Star that can provide alignment for emotional and rational elements in an experience as you design them. So you can eliminate clues that are negative, improve those neutral clues, and then dial up preferential clues that create that emotional bond. In a health and wellness center, how different does it feel? You know, we see all this stuff about a world-class health experience. In a health and wellness center, we know that if people feel strengthened, understood, and renewed, they will tell other people about that experience. They will tell other people about the experience. So having that North Star, what's the feeling that we want to create? An example of a clue, and if you've ever purchased a cell phone, you know, when we buy something, whether it's a box from Tiffany's or I think the first iPod that I ever opened, I think it was orgasmic. That whole concept of taking possession of something, an electronic device in particular. Well, you go to buy a cell phone and they take the phone, they rip open the box, and they'll rip out the phone, slip a SIM card in it, they'll hand you the phone, it's got stuff stuck on it, God only knows what it's like, and then they hand you the trash to take home with you. And in this project in the Czech Republic, this understanding of taking the phone and taking possession of the phone with a polishing cloth, where the phone is polished and presented to you. When you take the polishing cloth, and then they ask you if you'd like the trash. doing these things, delivering an experience, is extraordinarily powerful. You see, most of the directions in most of our industrial age is based on efficiency and not effectiveness. So we might tell someone like my 21-year-old son to deliver an experience. And the doorbell rings and we'll say, "John, answer the door." We're lucky that the door gets answered because there's no context. It's the function. And often in jobs that we have people do and the way that we view experiences, it's from the functionality and the efficiency. If my son were told, "Answer the door and make sure our guests feel welcome after their 2-day trip," it provides a context. We know that at least the door will get answered. So we begin to look at the function of an individual versus the role that an individual plays in an experience. How different would Starbucks be if baristas were cashiers? Knowing the roles that we play in experiences. And there are a whole set of tools and competencies that are built around the practice of experience management that are just beginning to evolve in this world. And the exciting thing is the ability to begin to think about everything differently, to step back from scraping the ice off of the middle car and understanding where the real opportunities are. Because experience management and thinking about total experience management can really change the way companies manage their business. Rather than from the organization out, it's from the customer back. Rather than making and selling, it's sensing and responding. And rather than thinking of it as pure emotional efficiency or pure rational efficiency, it's emotion and the rational thoughts. So as we move from make and sell to sense and respond, it's very critical to understand the distinctions and the difference. And how do we anticipate before our customers even know what they desire feeling? How do we get a handle and a fix on that? Thinking about the experience from the customer back. You know, I see a lot of stuff in moments of truth or process mapping or trees and all sorts of different ways of looking at the customer experience. What we talk about is psychological pathways. I like to call them psychopaths. But where is the customer psychologically as they come into the experience? Then how do we begin to understand and leverage the role of the unconscious? How do we become more clue conscious and embed those clues in experiences? And then how do we develop more rigorous systems to develop and manage experience clues? These are the challenges before every business today, whether they know it or not, and most are still in the dark. They're still struggling, trying to use old thinking and old models. And the exciting piece is, I probably won't live to see what the potential of this world of experience is all about. I'm supposed to be speaking at Esther Dyson's flight school, which is space travel and Virgin Galactica. And I was thinking, boy, it would be great to see the fruits of those kinds of things. But I don't think I'm going to live that long. But I'm having a hell of a lot of fun thinking about the customer experience differently. And what I'd like to share is a bit of information with you that you can take home and actually do this at home. You know, you always see these things, don't try this stunt at home. You can do this at home. It's the toilet paper triangle. It's very simple. It's one fold, another fold, a flip, and then you can actually put a logo on it if you'd like. Thank you very, very much, and I really enjoyed being with you all today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions, there are 2 live mics. And I can't tell you how much I have enjoyed this conference, and I'm doing more and more conferences It's just so exciting to see blogs, to see this whole world unfold and fold it into experiential aspects. So thank you for having me here today. I'm so thrilled to be here with you to share what you've taught me in this conference and what I hope I shared with you.
Just a really quick question, Kamran Hamid from Avenue of Razorfish. I know we're a long ways away from this. I mean, Apple, Starbucks, a few others really understand the experience. But what happens down the road from a consumer's point of view when every company you come in contact with is trying to make you cry?
It isn't so much about crying as much as it is, if you've ever been to a restaurant called Durgan Park up in Boston, they insult you. Now, that's pretty far from crying. It's knowing what people desire. People may need to laugh. People may need to feel insulted at Durgan Park.
Is there a resistance that builds up? If you're, as they say now, everybody is bombarded with brand messages and everything else. So if all these companies are all trying to...
What they're doing is they're creating homogeneity of experience by not doing the right research. I remember going to McDonald's and I'd be there and they're like, customers want to have fun. And you go somewhere else, customers want to have fun. Everywhere you go, customers want to have fun. There is very little individual thinking. What we think is we can rip off silver bullets from other companies by going after best practices and copying other companies. The time to stop is now to look inside the heads of consumers and understand what they want from us and from our brand. I absolutely agree with you. I think that get the rags out, everybody wants to cry, everybody wants to have fun, because we're too lazy to create a value proposition that's distinctive. Yes?
Can you scale this down as well as up? For instance, I work with really small software startups. They don't have any type of resources. The organization may be 1 or 2 people. Can that small an organization provide an experience?
Absolutely. One key word of advice is stop selling and start listening. Especially in startups. Startups are so anxious to tell their story, they don't listen. They're immediately in there. Bah, 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 bah. Listen to what the customer has to say. Probe. Understand those needs on a deeper level. We're so anxious because of this product make and sell to get in there, here are the features and the benefits and what we do and what's different than someone else and blah, 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 blah. And then we think creating a relationship is taking them to the front of the line at Taboo or whatever the club is in a hotel. It's so much deeper than that. And that would be my advice to a small startup is keep it simple. Listen, understand, and then respond with the appropriate clues that create the connection. It's that simple.
Can you compare the role of intuition versus research on what you were just talking about? Because when you ask a customer what they want, I think you had a slide on that where we only get the surface answer. We almost get an alibi. So doesn't that require a certain amount of personal intuition, putting myself in the role of the customer or the user? And then how do you, in a small company, you can be very nimble. How does a larger company convert that into actionable
Absolutely.
research?
It used to be. There were intuitives like Ray Kroc, Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. They were intuitive. In the absence of intuitive leadership, those are people that come around once in a lifetime. Howard Schultz. The science and the rigor that's beginning to develop around this space is phenomenal. We about 14 years ago when we first started doing this, we had maybe 1 or 2 tools. Today we're using 5 and 6 different tools to get to the unconscious thoughts and feelings that customers have. And it's very different. What we do is focus groups. We refer to that as the F word because it's group dynamics. It's a bunch of questions that we want the answers to versus where do they go. So one of the techniques is an unstructured interview with one question and probing on that one question for 2.5 hours and then analyzing that through deep metaphors and understanding what is the underpinning and the hierarchy of the thoughts that the customer expressed. It's walking in the customer's mind versus, and having the customer dump that out into what we call a consensus map in terms of how they create the thoughts that they create and what's linked to what. And it's absolutely phenomenal. But these tools are just beginning to evolve. Otherwise, it was very intuitive. So the science is evolving as we speak.
So that we don't have to be intuitive.
Exactly. Because not everybody has the intuitive skills. And most importantly, you can't get a whole organization to have intuitive skills. So the need for artificial intelligence in this space is huge. Thank you. Yes.
Ian Worley from Flow Interactive. I actually had a similar question, which was about the research methods that you use to actually get under the skin of things, because obviously focus groups have limitations. You can get certain kinds of information from depth interviews, as you've just talked about. But I'm wondering about the role of things like ethnography and some of the other techniques.
Ethnography is huge. Video, that we will do video. We do a special way of having a video of an experience done, and then the debrief of actually having the participant review the video with you. And a set of, it's not even probing questions, but it's using the same deep metaphor elicitation technique and having them talk about the video. And then as they talk about it, you'll actually get a deeper level of clues because they're seeing it as it happens. And to me, that's almost more effective than traditional ethnography, where you're counting on my interpretation and my intuitive skills as an ethnographer. So I think, again, there's great evolution in terms of tools and methodologies and stuff. And if you go to the website, there are actually some articles on some of these new research tools and so on that are pretty fascinating as it evolves. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to send you data or information that we have. Yes?
You mentioned blogging a couple of times. Could you go a little further with that, please?
Yes. I thought it was, you know, I'll give you my first experience. And this is from a personal perspective for the moment, and then I'll talk about it on a broader context. And this is the last question. The first time I ever experienced anything being published or put out there in the world, I have thin skin sometimes, I think, right? So I published this book, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm getting all of these. I'm like looking on Yahoo and looking on Google, and my name comes up, and I'm like, oh God, this is phenomenal. Then all of a sudden, somewhere down around number 62, I hit some blog on some company called Brand Aid or something, right? And they ripped me a new butt. I was crushed. It ruined me for 4 days. Walking around going, I can't believe this, blah, blah, blah. How could they say that? That's about 3 or 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I've grown a lot since then. And when I spoke at a conference out in San Francisco recently, I was so elated by the sense of community. I'm getting calls from my office. People said, hey, you came up on this blog and you look great this morning. I'm like, I look great? How the hell did I look great? Oh, well, we were on Flickr. And it's like, you gotta be kidding me. And then someone said I was hilarious. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Someone said I was hilarious? It is the richest thing. Susan Fournier at the Boston University and John Dayton we've been doing a lot of work with them over the years in trying to understand the sense of community. And this sense of community and what blogs are all about are going to hold such a major piece of what the world of marketing and the world of business is going to be about, that those organizations that begin to understand. And it's going to be so much more important to be emotionally connected with people and manage the clues, because the response is instantaneous. But the learning models that will come from mining that data for deep metaphors and understanding what the unconscious thoughts and needs are that are below the conversation will become powerful and huge in terms of having a better understanding of customers. So I think that the world is in huge transformation, and the opportunities in terms of creating holistic value, blogging and the internet will take us to levels that we never dreamed of. With that, I've got like 9 seconds and I'm on time. I can't believe that. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.